Hello, and welcome to Age of Wonders Planetfall. My name is Orange, and I'm back with another video. This video is a prequel of sorts to the previous video. The last one was about the first 5 turns from a kind of competitive and multiplayer standpoint. And during that video, I made an offhand remark about when we were in the weapons tech, where I said, you need to have a build in mind before you enter a competitive game. And what I'm going to try to accomplish with this video is to talk and discuss a bit about what does that mean, and what approach should you take to having a build in mind before you have a competitive game, or before even a single player, right? Where if you're playing a harder difficulty and you can't just start teching stuff that looks cool, maybe you need to think about it ahead of time. How do you do that? How do you approach that problem? So in the pursuit of that, what I've done here is I've picked a not random race and secret tech combination, but I've intentionally picked one that I've never played before. This is not, I don't think I've even played this in single player, but I've definitely never played it in a multiplayer. I don't think I've played against anybody that's explicitly used this in multiplayer either. And the reason for that is I'm going to be doing a little bit of this live. And I also want to kind of emphasize the point of you don't need to have the perfect build going into a game, because you won't get better if all you do is play a perfect or a meta build, and if you only have the same thing you do every time. You won't really get better at the game. The way to get better at the game is to try stuff, and often to fail. You have to lose games. You have to try a build or a game approach that you haven't done before, and figure out, is it working, is it not working, why is it not working, and really the best way to do that is to try and honestly to fail. And so I'm not going to claim that the discussion I'm having today is 100% correct or optimal. All I'm going to claim is that what I'm looking at today are builds that I think might be fun, and builds that may be viable. They certainly, at first blush, appear to be viable. And what we're really trying to accomplish is more so just how do I, as a competitive player, look at things, look at mods, look at units, and why do I look at them that way? More so than coming up with something that I think is going to go out there and win a game 80% of the time. And like I said, towards that pursuit, I picked a combination I've never played before, but it wasn't random. This is a combination that I picked because I think, or I believe, that there's probably 3 or so builds I can come up with pretty quick that are all very different, and that are all might be viable. What I picked is Syndicate Sign Number. And immediately, just at first blush, what's the synchronization there? Well, Syndicate has side damage, side number loves doing side damage. That's great. So there's immediately something you're looking at of, okay, I can start stacking side damage. And that's the easiest, maybe not the best, but the easiest way to start working towards a build. There's a couple different ways that we can start this approach, and I think the best one is to let's take a look at our initial units first, or initial available units first. So every race has 4 units that they can build, not from turn 1, but they don't have to tech into. Every race gets a scout, every race gets a co-unit, every race gets a specialist unit. I'm going to say support, I'm sorry, because on Age of Wonders, I've been trained too much by that game, but specialist unit. And every race gets a specialist unit, which is usually some type of DPS damage dealer unit. For the Syndicate, for their scout is the runner. And at the risk of derailing my video again, let's have a quick discussion about scouts in Planetfall versus scouts in Age of Wonders 3. In Age of Wonders 3, scouts were typically given to you by your class They were typically a summon, and they were typically absolute trash in combat. There was a sort of scout unit that you could build that would be called an irregular unit. That unit was a lot more combat focused. In many cases, it would never really be used as a scout. Even as a combat unit, most races, irregulars were pretty trash, frankly, in Age of Wonders 3. The Age of Wonders Planetfall Scout is a lot closer to an irregular than to a scout in Age of Wonders 3. All the Planetfall Scouts have some combat tricks. Their stats, just in general, are a lot closer to power with the tier 1 core units than a scouts would be, or the irregulars would be in Age of Wonders 3 to the basic tier units. I've never personally tried it yet, and I haven't had it tried against me, but I think the scouts might be good enough, or some scouts might be good enough, that there is a practical build with scouts that could win you a game. That you get a few scouts, throw a couple mods on them, use them to snipe a city out, and then using that momentum, transition to something else, and then build out to win a game. The runner is a scout I think is especially apt for that sort of approach. Let me switch to the yellow stack so I can do some comparisons here. It has one shield, just like your core unit does. It has less HP on paper. In practice, it's actually got more, because the escape module ability gives it 15 healing if it dies. Well, quote unquote dies. So in practice, this actually has 45 plus HP as opposed to the indenture's 40 HP. So it's actually more health than the core unit. Its damage is pretty trash. It's both got less damage and lower range than the indenture does. It has flanker, which kind of makes up a bit of the difference, but it's never going to be a damage dealer. The reason I view this as a possible build-around unit is universal camouflage. Your opponents can't see it without detection anyways, and most people aren't going to prioritize detection in the early game. You should be building scouts regardless, and you can probably just build, I don't know, 6 to 8 scouts in the early game. Use them to scout. Once you get a couple mods, you can mod them up in the field, merge them all together, and start sniping out cities really early in the game. And that's probably good enough, I think. So that's one build that we can look at. Is, it won't be the full build because you're going to want to transition out of it, but starting with runners is a way I think you could approach with Syndicate. The core unit is the indentured. On paper, it's not very good. It doesn't really compare with the other races' core units. It's got a repeating arc attack, which is really nice. And when we look at the weapons text, we will figure out why we think that's really nice. But other than that, Arc Power Blast is not as good as most of the other races' alternate attacks. It's only a single target. It's not AoE. Knockback is debatably bad in many situations. The stagger's okay, but again, it's only single target. And its range at 3 hexes is rough. Again, on paper, this unit doesn't look like much. We will begin to figure out why it is a build-around unit, or potentially a build-around unit, once we start looking at the other support attacks. Our support is the Overseer, or like I said, our specialist is the Overseer. Its attack is actually okay. Psi attacks typically have slightly less damage because they ignore armor. An 8 repeating is not bad. There are Psi attacks that are much better, but it's not terrible, and there's a lot of Psi attacks that are a lot worse. I still don't think this would really ever be a build-around unit. one of the differences between Age of Wonders 3 and Planetfall is that in Planetfall, at least right now, there aren't any supports, or again, specialists, that do enough damage to be your primary killer unit and damage dealing unit. Age of Wonders 3, the easiest example is the White Witch, where you could just build those and win the game. I don't really think there's an equivalent approach in Planetfall yet to be able to do that. I'm willing to be proved wrong, but I don't think so. The reason you want Overseers is because they synergize with Indentured. Impose Discipline is just a flat bonus to any Indentured in the stack. Healing is always good. Cerebral Override is extremely good, at least in a player's hands. Being able to refresh action points can be game-breaking. And this is not a once per battle, it's a cooldown. So this is a nuts ability that the AI tends to not use correctly in auto, but in a player's hands is really good. So you'll always have a couple of these floating around, but it's not going to be a huge build-around unit. Our last easily accessible unit is the Enforcer. This is a build-around unit. Many of the skirmishers tend to be, not all of them. But this one is, and the reason is because its primary attack, even though it doesn't have much else going on, but the primary basic attack is a melee psionic attack, which means it ignores shields and it ignores armor, which are the primary ways of damage reduction in this game. And just being able to flat out ignore those is crazy, especially on a melee attack that staggers while you're at it. This is a lot of killing power in a unit. And this is a way to win the game, is to get some Enforcers and kit them out with ridiculous stuff. So from our 4 basic units, we've looked at, well, maybe there's a way to use Scouts, maybe there's a way to use Indentured, maybe there's a way to use Enforcers. Let's take a quick look at our other easily available units. I'm going to define easily available as your tier 2, well, tier 3 tech, but tier 2 unit for your secret tech, because you only need 2 techs to get that. I'll have your tier 2 tech, tier 2 units for your racial, and I will discuss quickly the tier 3 tech, tier 2 second racial unit. Often I would say this is probably a little bit too hard to get. In the games I play, which again, I do 1v1, simultaneous turns. The game's often over by turn 50 to 70, which means that any units that you want to be fighting in kind of the big fights that are going to start in the late 40s, mid 50s turn range, you need to have them produced, modded, and moved to where they need to be. And it's hard to do that, to get 3 techs deep. Again, this takes 21 turns just for this tech. So it's twice as expensive as this tech. Almost twice as expensive as this tech. So it's hard just to tech into it. Plus, you can't tech into anything else. Teching into anything else makes it take even longer, so your mods are going to be behind. Once you get the tech, you still have to build enough of them to be worthwhile, and then you have to get them to where they need to be. It's really hard to make this work. It might work. I'm not going to rule it out, which is why I'm still going to talk about the unit, but it's just hard. So, as far as the units themselves go, let's start with the Guild Assassin, I guess. The Guild Assassin is a sniper. Snipers are very good units in Planetfall because they have extra range. They have range 9. Most units have range 7. Or even less, or melee. That extra range means that whatever your opponent has to do with this has to come to it. You can afford to camp because you can just shoot the enemy outside of their range of you. However, the Guild Assassin, unlike maybe some of the other unlike some of the other snipers, I don't think it's a build around. It does arc damage, which, for reasons we'll discuss in a bit, is not really the damage type you want for one single attack. You want to be doing multiple attacks with arc damage if you can. Its snapshot doesn't have any extra abilities that proc on it. It's just a relatively low damage and moderate range attack, so it's pretty weak. Breach Round is an interesting ability. I haven't really played with these guys, so I don't know how good it is in practice, but at least on paper, it looks like it gets better the longer the game goes. Early game, there just aren't things that have 5 shields and or 5 armor that you need to get around. So it's not, this isn't something that's going to help you early in the game. The universal camouflage is a neat trick. So actually maybe in that scout build, where you're already attacking into some ARC stuff, maybe you toss in 1 or 2 of these guys, just as a little bit more damage to go along with your scout survivability. Hi Discord. And Superior Overwatch is fine, but I don't see this as something I'm going to rush to get. Again, maybe in that scout build, as I talk more about it, maybe you would want to get 1 or 2 of these guys early, just to support that. But let's continue as if we're not going to get too worried about it. The Mirage, as I said, it's going to come out really late. It's also a flyer, which means that it costs Cosmite. I also tend to think flyers are just bad in general, because 10% harder to hit is not as good as being in cover, so flyers just, against a human, it's open season. They're hard to make work. The Mirage is a specialist flyer, so it's actually a support unit by trade, not a damage dealer. Again, it's unlike our other support or our other specialist unit. Its attack is only 7 damage as opposed to the 8. Hallucination Projector is actually powerful, and maybe something I want, but I won't want to stack a bunch of these guys. Mirage Field is a defense mode that helps. Adaptive Camouflage can make your whole stack be invisible. It's a fine unit. I think there's a place for it. I probably think less of it than I should, and I don't think any of the builds I would consider this as something to worry about as I'm working towards a build. The final unit to look at is the Initiate, which is our sign number unit, and also, as I said in the previous video, many of the Secret Tech units have unique abilities based on the race, and the Syndicate Initiate is no different. Compared to the Vanguard, it has Fueled by Servitude. Fueled by Servitude gives it +1 psi damage for each indentured unit in the battle, not the stack, in the battle. That's pretty huge. By default, this attack is actually less damage than our support's attack, although it applies a pretty good debuff on hit. But with even just 1 or 2 indentured, it gets significantly better than our support for damage. And in a big fight, this thing is going to rack people. In that indentured build, there's probably 2 ways that I would look towards building it. One is to build a lot of indentured and have a few initiates to do selective damage. The other way is to build a lot of initiates and have enough indentured to buff them all. Either way might work, but it would slightly change, I think, the mods we would be looking to get. But this is a oh, it also has detection. That's a neat little buff. But this is a unit that is, with the Syndicate, I don't think this is a sole unit. You will definitely want to have some indentured support with this unit, so you're never going to just mass this unit. But it is good enough that it might be a build you want to go to. So, now that we've looked at our units, what's the next thing to think about? And before we talk about mods, let's talk about how quickly you think you need to make your build get online. You always want to be as fast as practical, but there is definitely a curve as far as some builds come online really early and then fall off almost as quick. Some builds take a little longer but might be good through the whole game, and some builds you just want to do enough to not die before you really get the broken stuff out. In general, your rush builds might only need 1 or 2 mods to get started. I don't know if just rushing and only rushing is viable in Planetfall. Because of militia defense and the way that works, I think you're always going to lose enough units that you can't just win by rushing and taking all the opponent's cities by turn 20 or 30. But I do think you can rush, take a city, raise a city, and not have lost so much from the stack that you, or from the stack that did that you lose the game because your economy is trash. So I do think that rush builds might be viable as far as with one of your starting units, you want to tech into 1, maybe 2 mods, throw those mods on your starting units, and then, you know, go find a fight. The second approach, and the most common approach from the games I've played, is you want to get an early tier 2 unit, and you want to find 3 mods to put on that unit that make it really good and a threat to your opponent, and you want that unit to be good enough that it forces your opponent to react to it. In Planetfall, having proactive units is way better than having reactive units. Let me rephrase that. Having a proactive tactical strategy is way better than having a reactive tactical strategy. And what I mean by that is you want to dictate the terms of your fights. There's different ways to do that. One way to do that is you know where the opponent is, he doesn't know where you are, and you can determine exactly what you bring to the fight, and he can't. The other way to do that is to have a unit so good that your opponent needs to kill it, because otherwise it'll just destroy his army. Snipers are really the poster child, I think, for that, of you can have snipers in the back line that your opponent can't even reach. Like, they have to approach you, and you can just delay with your other chaff while the snipers just win the fight because your opponent can't address it. There might be other ways that I'm blanking on right now to do that. I mean, you can also just have units, you know, that have a bunch of defensive stats plus regeneration and are just damage sponges that your opponent literally can't kill them. That's probably another way to do it. That might be a little harder. But you need something like that. You need a proactive tactical approach. Whereas with the rush build, that is more of a strategic way to win the game, not a tactical way to win the game, and you don't really need that because you're hoping that you will have gained enough incremental advantages from the strategic side that your tactical side can be lacking and you still be fine because you just have so much more economy that you win that way. The third way, or the third approach that I said, is to kind of be the late game approach, where what you need is maybe deep, right? Maybe you're looking for wraiths, right? You want to get those tanks, destroy people with tanks, and you need to live that long is the problem. And that's hard. Because you have to balance getting enough other tech to throw together an army that's good enough that when you lose fights, you've killed enough of the opponent that you don't lose a city or that you don't lose enough economy to still be competitive for the second round of fights 10, 15 turns later once you've rebuilt your armies, hopefully with your better units. I haven't really tried that approach. That's always been the harder approach. Even in Age of Wonders 3, the longer the game went, usually the harder it was to get there. And those usually just take longer to actually optimize and make work. So I will focus more on how do we build something that I can, or how do we have an approach that we can have the unit we want and the mods we want to have it, or the mods we want to have on it, by turn 20 to 30. Because again, we need to get the unit. You get the unit first, because then you can start producing the unit. You can always mod it later. But you need to get the unit, get the mods for that unit, put the mods on the unit, and then get the unit to where it needs to be. Again, typically with a deadline of around turn 30. So if you're lucky, once you start getting these better units, you can be popping them out hopefully once a turn, maybe once every 2 turns. You probably want 8 or so of your really good unit. Hopefully more like 12. So you have to budget 10 to 12 turns of building the unit, teching into the unit, again, with no research boosts. For me to get initiates, which, again, I probably wouldn't be using in any of the builds we're going to talk about, but to get to it, we've already budgeted, that's 17 turns. It'll go quicker once you get some research pickups, and maybe if you add a little more knowledge income, but either way, you're talking turn 12 probably is the earliest you can build this, and that's assuming that you don't have other production demands, which you will. You're going to have to build colonizers, you're going to have lost some units from expansion that you're going to need to replace, you're going to be building scouts. Practically, the earliest that I'm probably going to be able to have, say, even just a stack of initiates is going to be turn 30. 25 to 30 probably. If I'm not being 100% optimal. And then after that, you need to tech into the mods. Now, there's some convenience there that your mods can be researched at the same time that you're building the unit, but yeah, it gets complicated. So the whole reason I'm having this discussion is that there's a limit on how much you can actually reasonably want. You probably can get 2 tier 4 if you do nothing else. Luckily for us, I don't think there's anything here we super want, but it's more likely that you can get all your tier 1s, maybe 2 tier 2s, or 2 tier 3s, and then a tier 2 or 2 to get you to a tier 3. Again, you can maybe splurge into one of these tier 4 ones, but the only one I would say that is easy to do would be like this accursed gifts, or the equivalent one where you only have to get 2 techs to get into it. But that's a big commitment. That is that's a lot of time to research that technology, and then you only get 2 things out of it. And that's also ignoring you might want your you might want your support tech here. So you really need to be looking at your build and not leave this screen, right? You're not zooming this far down. No. This is what you got, and you need to pretty much write off probably at least one of the weapons lines, and either you're going to get a ratio unit or 2, or you're going to go for something like the accursed gifts, the tier 4 equivalent. You're not going to get both. So let's kind of recap the 3 builds that we wanted to talk about. The first one is our Rush Scout build. The second one is a Enforcer focus build, so we want a whole bunch of psi damage and psi buffs. And the third one is our Initiate build supported by, not Initiate, our Indentured build supported by Initiates. I'm going to screw that up because they sound too much alike. For the Scout build, what do we want for that? Well, we said that's a rush build, right? So we are going to be building the Scouts early. We're going to be sending them out early, and we want to be able to fight with them pretty much as soon as we can get them into their opponent's territory as a stack. So that might be as early as like turn 15. So we probably only can look at maybe 2 techs that we would have on hand by that point. The obvious choices then are look at our tier 1s, and then maybe one tech past the first tier 1 tech. So of these 3 techs, Foreboding Darkness, Darker Word is not going to help that sort of build. We're not planning on having those units survive. They don't do enough damage. Foreboding Darkness is out of the question. Exploitative Targeting System, 20% accuracy is very good. Flanker is also very good. The problem is our scouts already have it. Our runners already have it. So this is, nope, we don't need that. That pretty much just leaves Arc. We could do psionics, but they don't do psionic damage. So obviously Arc is the choice we want. Conveniently, static build-up module is great. It will go a long way towards making our subpower damage get a lot better. And it's almost good enough. That might be all we need, right? If we're going to be fighting undefended cities, we're hopefully going to have more units than the enemy. We have the mobility advantage. Our units are floating, so we don't have to. I think that I'm pretty sure you can just fly over stuff. So like hopefully we can outmaneuver the enemy. We can focus fire the enemy. Static buildup is great. That may be all we need for that. Our initial rush units. If we wanted, we said maybe we could get to the tier 2 tech. So let's take a look. Arc Retaliation. It gains 2 arc resistance, that doesn't matter. When it's damaged by an enemy unit within 2 hexes, there's a chance to apply stun and it receives damage. That's good. The problem is that within 2 hexes, we need to be within 5 hexes for our attack. If we go back to look at this unit, it's a short range attack, range 5. Getting in close isn't bad. The problem is that well, that's not what I want. The problem is that to get in close, we're going to be losing attacks because we have to move up. We have a little extra HP. Applying stun is fine. This is a maybe. I don't think I would put it on scouts. I just don't think it's enough of a benefit. I think if I was going to try a scout rush build, and as I said at the beginning of this video, I don't know if that's even smart, but if I was going to try it, all I would put on my scouts is the static build-up module. Make this my turn 1 research, and then go out with the scouts, and then start moving towards my alternative plan. And that alternative plan is probably going to be initiates, because indentured. And the reason I want to go indentured is because I've already got my arc research. I've already got a mod I would love to put in my indentured, so I haven't lost anything. There's no opportunity cost other than the fact that I've spent Cosmite on these scouts that are probably going to die. But I haven't lost any research time. And so once I've researched this, I know what I want as far as my second go, which is I'm going to want to go to indentured, which means I'm going to want initiates to support my indentured, or be supported by my indentured, synergize. And then that just moves also into our second build, which is if we also did that first, what would we look to do then? Obviously, we want initiates. We want them early enough to be able to build a couple to put in our stack so that we can fight later. So we're going to want to rush to that. With the scout build, we'd get this first. With the indentured build, we would skip this and then probably do this first and then come back to pick the module up. But now our tech looks like bang, bang, bang. And we can do that pretty quick. With a little bit of research buffs and some pickups, we can probably get all 3 of those by turn 10. Mark of the Dark Sun is more useful with a indentured build. I don't think I would put it on my indentured because this is not a mod that you want to spam. Because if the more units you put it on, the less likely it is to be helpful. What you want this on is your very best units that do a bunch of damage that will be getting the kills and then get progressively better as the fight goes on. You don't want to split this buff on multiple units. So this would go on my initiates. My initiates have a ton of extra damage because I'm going to have a bunch of indentured floating around, turning that 7 attack to a 12 attack, hopefully. And then I'm going to have a stacking 20% damage boost on top of that. The static build-up module will be going in my indentured, and that may be good enough. We'll see. So what else would we want on our initiate indentured build? We didn't want exploitative targeting system on our scouts because it gave flanker, which doesn't help us. But in the initiate indentured build, flanker might be helpful. A lot of times flanker is best on mobile units because they're more likely to be able to get around into the edge, but on a unit that doesn't start with it, it's just a straight buff, right? Like, even if you don't always get a benefit out of it, you're getting something out of it. The 20% accuracy is very good. It's better against certain builds than others, but it's not bad. And the 10% increased damage is actually significant once we're talking about initiates that have 12 damage per hit, plus they're getting some stacking damage boosts that already have a 10% damage boost from just the mod. Like, once you start stacking damage like that, these things are going to be lethal. So this is a very easy mod that we can tack again by the time we want to get to it after we research this, this, and this. This may only be a one-turn tack. So it's a very easy mod to get access to. What else would we want to look at? Well, let's take a look at our psionics. We haven't done that yet. Mantra of Clarity. Attacks easier to hit. That's also very good. It's essentially just a straight upgrade to the exploitative target. Well, not straight upgrade. Well, yeah, it is, because it works for everything, not just the unit that you're using. It doesn't give flanker, but as we said, that may not be a huge deal, because we might not be actually flanking too much, because we might be, you know, shooting from behind cover into enemies behind cover, and it may not be a mobile fight like that. Psionic buffs from this unit make friendly units harder to hit, which means that this is something that I can throw onto my overseers relatively cheaply, which is fine. That doesn't help our initiates at all. It's another damage boost. Overall, my judgment of this is it's probably an upgrade to exploitative targeting system. But it's not so much of an upgrade that I would always put this on if there wasn't a reason to go down this tree otherwise. Whereas if I was getting exploit weakness because I might want preventative control, I could skip this because Mantra and Clarity might not be good enough. Focus Flames is okay. Changing damage type for the Indentured Initiate build is not as useful. The burning is fine, but this is 10% damage in a side grade largely, and I don't know if that would be good enough to want to spend the Cosmite. I think this is more of a reactive mod. If the enemy for some reason has a bunch of psionic resistance, psionic damage resistance, this is a way to get around that. And again, it's a cheap way to do it, relatively speaking. But I don't think this would be a core part of my... This isn't something I would immediately look at and say I want this in my build. Let's quick check the next one. Focus Venom. It's very similar to Focus Flames, except it has a lot higher strength to proc. It's also a 20% damage boost instead of 10%. I think that's a strict upgrade from Focus Flames. I'm not sure if it's enough of an upgrade to want to be definitely do this. That being said, Mind Wipe is a okay tactical operation. Catatonic is a very good debuff to apply, but it affects the physical channel, which if you're trying to get around the physical channel because your opponent is resisting it, this probably won't work anyways. So I don't know if I would ever want to explicitly look at Focus Venom. Again, maybe if there's something further on down the line. I don't know. To be honest, I think the Psionics tree is not super great. Although there is a notable exception once we talk about Enforcers. But for the Initiate and Indentured build, I don't think there's enough on this tree to really want. Again, maybe if I thought Mantra of Clarity was a big enough upgrade over Exploitative Target System. In our racial mods, we have Exploitative Target System. What's Preventative Control give us? Detection, +1 vision range, 3 psi. That's strictly for scouts. A lot of the detector mods are actually very good in combat. This is not one of them, unfortunately. Cerebral Control Collars, immune to all morale effects is better than it looks. Considered an indentured unit. Oh, but it is only non-syndicate, biological, and cyber units, so this is very limited use for us. So our mods aren't great for the Initiate Indentured build, which means, what does this give us? Here we go. Well, this would be good if it wasn't what Indentured, or what Initiates got as Devour Hope. It's the same thing. Right? It's not technically the same attack, but it's practically the same attack. So that Initiate Indentured build has a lot of very good synergies of the units. Our problem with that is our mod support is lacking, which might be okay. we're going to be trying to out-economy the enemy regardless, so we may not have a bunch of Cosmite to throw on things. So we may just be content with teching into initiates, teching into static build-up modules, and then from there, maybe we start looking towards the deep stuff, and we just go hunting, and we say that's good enough. Let's look towards Malictors, which are nuts, by the way. And maybe we want to tech our tier 3 unit early enough that we can have at least a couple of them in the fight. Even if it won't be our focus, we'll have a few of them, and they can support us from there. I think that would be my approach with it. And so now we come into that third build. Again, first build, go with scouts, then flex into our second build, which our second build was go with initiates. Our third build was enforcers, and enforcers were good because they were a melee attack that was psionic damage, so it ignored stuff, or it ignored damage resistance. And what we would want with that is probably some more survivability boosts. We would like to make our enforcers less likely to die on their way in. And then we would like a way to make sure that if the enemy is trying to get around our psionic damage channel, we would like a way to still make sure that we can deal damage. So in that case, Focus Flames looks pretty good. We have a chance to apply burning, which is not bad. More importantly, this lets us still use a psionic weapon to bypass shields, but now we have a way to not be countered by psionic damage resist, which a opponent that sees your combination will probably be looking to do. I don't know if I would put this on immediately, but I would want Focus Flames as an option for if I saw my opponent start to counter my damage channel. Other things that we would want, again, either match or clarity. What we really want is exploitative targeting system. That just makes our enforcers crazy. Accuracy, we need the accuracy because invasion is the only way the enemy can avoid or can mitigate our attacks. So 20% accuracy is huge for us. Flanker is just good for melee units because we're going to be getting up in the grill. Mark of the Dark Sun, again, it's okay. It tends to have diminishing returns, in my opinion, the more units you put it on. So I don't know if I would put this on every unit, but I wouldn't mind having it and putting it on a couple of my enforcers. The one I really want, though, I think, in that case, is Consuming Gaze. Because it gives us a way to heal our enforcers and still be doing damage at the time, and just make them a lot more survivable. It doesn't give shields or it doesn't give armor. That's kind of a weakness slightly overall of Syndicate and Side Number. We're kind of glass cannons, but this makes our glass cannons a little less glass, and it's with an ability that conveniently also does damage. So even though we're healing, we're still killing stuff. I think in a Enforcer build, I would definitely want to exploit weakness. I would be hard teching to get Consuming Gaze. I think a fun sidetrack would be Arc Retaliation Defense. That's just really good in melee units. This would be probably my third priority, but getting this, I think I would research both of these techs first, because I can do that really quick. And then I would go for Consuming Gaze, because I feel that's very vital. And then from there, I would debate of, do I want to sidetrack into this, because I think it's good enough? And honestly, I probably do. Again, it's one of the few ways we can give ourselves a shield boost, and it has very defensive because it stuns things once we get into the back line. The other approach would be, well, let's really go deep, go Pain Mirror, which does very similar things. In fact, it does it a lot better, except it takes way longer to get. Forbidden Mantra is very good as well, but it's probably worth it to go Bang Bang and then move into Electron Impact before we start going deep into the Side Number for that. So hopefully Up to this point, again, I've gone in a lot of different directions. I've talked about a lot of stuff, and I've really just kind of analyzed this. I don't know if I've done a great job of pulling back a little bit to show how we go from this discussion into just generically looking at builds. So let's try to mitigate, or let's try to let's try to fix that. What have I been doing here, right? So I've determined where I need to focus, right? I need to focus on the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and to a mostly lesser extent the tier 4 techs. And I've been ruling out stuff I don't need. I've pretty much ignored employee deception entirely. A lot of that is because I've just kind of been ignoring tactical operations, which isn't super practical, but typically what you need first is you need to get the units you want to be building to win the game, and you need to find a way to make them the most effective they can be. After that is when you start flexing out in your weapons tree, and you can get some of your maybe stuff, right? That's where you can say, well, maybe I want a couple snipers. Let's grab guild assassins and throw one or two of those in the stack. Let's grab employee deception, so that we can do some fun stuff with universal camouflage, so that we can watch where the enemy's going. That's just a trash operation. Anyways, then you can start. Oh, actually, Whispers and Visions is probably a better one. Whisper of Discord is a very good scout. And Vision of Darkness is an army nuke. Minus morale is very good. But that is a secondary desire. My primary desire, goal 1, get the unit I need. And make that unit accessible. So again, like I started with when I looked at the screen, either your tier 2 secret tech unit or your first 2 tier 2 racial units are. If you don't start with the unit you need, those are the ones you have to limit it to, because it's just too hard to go deeper in the tree and have them be around practically. Once you get the unit, then you get the mods. Once you get the mods, then you start looking at your wants instead of your needs. And that want can either be getting a couple ops, or that want can be getting a higher tier unit or a higher tier mod. In that case, then you start looking deeper, but you can do that kind of in the game. That's a decision you may want to make once you know what your opponent is, and what you know, or once you know how he's approaching the game, what he's trying to accomplish. The important thing here is, again, you want to be proactive, not reactive. Your goal is to have an approach that's good enough that you don't have to change what you're doing to counter your opponent. Your goal is that your opponent has to counter you, because it's way easier to have something that's winning you the game than it is to come up with something that prevents you from losing it. And that's why when I was talking about the different lengths of time to try to win the game, the longer one is just so much harder, because you have to play a reactive game, and there's just too many options, I think, in Planetfall, and you can't always guarantee that you're going to have the counter you need when you need it. The one caveat, and again I discussed this in one line in my previous video, is it's often good to get a damaging tactical operation, and actually this Dispel tactical operation is probably good enough to also want. Hopefully your research build gets that for you and you don't have to go out of your way. It's probably not a huge issue, because typically by the time you think you need it, turn 20, turn 30, you can get the tech for 1 or 2 turns, so it's not super out of your way. The more expensive techs are going to be up here. A lot of the stuff gets really almost trivially cheap by that part of the game. Is there anything else I want to talk about with this? Again, I'll kind of tie it back to what I said at the beginning, which is none of what I talked about today, I don't know if it works. I really don't. I think it will work. I think these are strong potential approaches, but I can't guarantee it. I've never tried it. And the best way to figure out if they work is not just to sit here and talk about it for 45 minutes, as much fun as that may be. The best way to see if they work is to try it, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, you'll have learned something. Either you've learned that your build isn't good, is that your approach to the build was wrong. Maybe you went out of your way, or your tech research order was wrong. Maybe you prioritized your build order wrong, did something else on the strategic side. Maybe you just weren't sure how to use your good unit properly in the tactical side of things. Hopefully that's what the problem is, because the other problem that you could have is just that the build itself is trash, and that is just, it's not as good as what your opponent brought to the table. Again, we're in early days with Planetfall, so there are a few builds right now I think that you just can't counter, that they're just too good. Triumph is very good about patching stuff. I think that'll get fixed relatively quick, but there's a lot of moving parts in the game. There's probably stuff that no one's even discovered yet that's just too good to fail. But again, we'll see how that develops in the future. For now, hopefully this was a helpful video to anyone who's just trying to get a little better at the game, and enjoy Planetfall. Bye.